Hello and welcome, everyone. In today's podcast, we're talking about versioning in software testing and how this can build efficiency, traceability, and auditability into your test process. So if you're in a QA team, if you're a project manager, a product owner, or really anyone who is involved in the test process, then this one is for you. I'm Ashley. I'm currently a market analyst and product manager here at MGM Technology Partners. Previously, I've worked in business and IT projects in quality assurance, business analysis, and management and project management roles. So I have a little bit of experience when it comes to software testing. Today, I'm sitting here in the beautiful city of Prague. And with me is my lovely colleague, Caroline from Grenoble, France.
Thank you, Ashley. So hello, I'm Caroline. I'm currently project lead and business analyst also at MGM. I've been working in complex IT projects for many years. And so here we're excited to share our thoughts and experience on versioning with you all in the software testing community.
Yes, we are. Firstly, today we're going to look into what versioning is. And then after this, we're going to go into what can go wrong without it. And finally, we will describe what we believe are the benefits of versioning. At the end, we'll share some practical tips if you're interested on how you can adopt versioning in your projects. Caroline and I, as we've mentioned, we've worked in projects and have done testing ourselves. And currently we work with teams every day who deal with this stuff. So we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to test management.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this episode and you're still managing tests in Excel, we have no judgment. We've been there. Or if you are using a test management tool, but you're not using versioning, then this one is for you.
Right. So let's start at the beginning. What is versioning in the context of testing and quality assurance? The simplest way to think about it is every time you release a new version of your software, the tests that go with it need to reflect what's changed in the new version. Some tests stay the same, some get updated, and some are brand new. Versioning is how you keep all of that organized. So for any given release, you know exactly which tests were applied, what the results were, and nothing gets lost or overwritten along the way. And without it, things can get messy pretty fast.
Yeah, in our terms, versioning means storing consecutive version of all the test artifacts, your test case, test suite, the test execution, with their result, evidence. So you can always go back and see exactly what was expected and tested for a specific release. Because for each release of the application you are testing, you can maintain a version of your test artifact.
Exactly. And the one thing that makes a real difference in practice is applying a mapping between the whole test specification, including the executions and the application release. So when your tests follow the same version structure as your development cycles, alignment becomes easy. Now, if you look into how different tools handle versioning, versioning can be implemented through a combination of mechanisms. So for example, change history, read-only baselines or snapshots, release variants, things like cloning tests or versioning with a delta, executed test run snapshots, traceability to versioned requirements, and so on and so on. The approach varies, but essentially the goal is the same. We're keeping a reliable record of what was tested for each release.
Yeah, not all tools go this far. Some tools only version individual test cases. And that's helpful, but it leaves teams looking for which collection of tests and which execution belong to a specific release. A more complete approach version the full set of tests, of test suite, of runs, so your traceability stays intact all the way from requirements through the test design, execution, and results.
And while we're talking about the test runs, it's one thing to know what the test case said at a specific point in time. But if you can also capture which runs were executed against that version, essentially you're wrapping a bracket around the whole thing. You can then get full traceability. Okay, so to do a quick recap here of what we've just spoken about, versioning gives you a complete preserved record of your tests per release. And how deep that goes really depends on the tool and the approach that you take in your project. There is a related concept that can sometimes get confused with versioning. I'll hand over to Caroline to take us through this concept now.
Yeah, I would like to clarify this because sometimes people confuse versioning with change history. So let's take a look at the difference. So for a lot of people, they view versioning as tracking edits. Who changed step 3 of a test case and when? But that's actually a different concept. That's change history, and the distinction matters. Change history tracks what happens to an individual test case, who edited it, what they change when. It's like looking at the commit history of a single file. That's useful, but it's only part of the picture. Versioning covers a lot more than that. It's about preserving the entire test specification and execution as a complete set for a given release. So instead of just knowing that someone updated a specific test case last Tuesday, you know that version 1.0 of your test specification contained this specific test. They were executed with this result, and that whole package belonged to that release. So change history is the detail, and versioning gives you the full picture.
Right, and the ideal scenario is really to have both here. Versions that capture the full scope of what was tested for a release, and change histories within those versions that let you drill down into the detail of individual test cases.
Yeah, and this is actually how we approach it in our project at MGM, where we just don't version test cases alone, right? We version the whole test specification for a release, and within that, we still have the history of individual changes.
And that's a really important distinction, actually. Now we have a good overview of what versioning is and how it can compare to change history. So I think it's time to take a look at the challenges that teams can have when there is no versioning. What people don't always think about is that when your product changes, the definition of correct changes along with it. And that definition lives in your test cases. If you're not versioning those test cases, you're basically changing the rules without recording the change. Or worse, you recreate new test cases all the time, which is not an efficient work practice, really. Or you can even end up with multiple copies of the same test case floating around, copied between people, duplicated across folders, and then you can't answer basic questions quickly. For example, which tests were run for release 2.3? What did the test case actually say at the time? Who changed it and why did they change it? I've experienced this myself at times in the past in my projects. And in the case of using Excel for test management, collaboration with teams can be very difficult. You can be managing multiple files at a time. You're really not maintaining one single source of truth. Teams end up duplicating files, working in separate folders, separate files, hoping that nothing gets overwritten or even missed. You end up spending more time managing the spreadsheet than actually doing the testing.
Yeah, I'm thinking also about the parallel work problem. Say your production system is on version 1.0 and you're already preparing for the next version, or you have a patch, right? So without versioning, how do you keep the content of 1.0 intact while editing the same test for the next release? Versioning solved that by letting you maintain both lines cleanly side by side.
That's right. And then on top of that, you also have the stakeholder question. So, for example, somebody from compliance or a product owner asks about a closed test run. Maybe a bug has reappeared, or they want to know what was tested 6 months ago, who tested it, what was the result. Without versioning, your team is really digging through old test executions or reports trying to reconstruct the answer. This consumes resources and often ends up in assumptions based on incomplete information. All right, so as we can see now, without versioning, it's difficult and can be costly to perform investigations to review a previous execution or even executions. Caroline can take us now through what are the benefits of versioning.
Sure. So for me, first, your test stay in sync with your application releases. Teams can reuse the test case across version while keeping traceability to requirements and defects. Having a central tool that keeps versions linked to a product release and the related requirements, right? So this then gives you one trusted source of truth. Versioning also unlock analytics that are nearly impossible otherwise. When you can tie test specifications to application releases, you can start analyzing trends over time. Where is regression risk increasing? Where is test coverage drifting? Are the gaps you haven't noticed? For instance, you can identify when a test case is at risk because it has failed across multiple versions. You can do that when your history is scattered across different format. I mean, you can't do that when it's scattered across different format or when it's unclear.
Yeah, exactly. I actually have a good example to share here. So a client that we worked with was moving from Excel to a test management tool that had versioning in it. Previously, they had a single master spreadsheet that people copied and edited locally. After adopting proper versioning, they could instantly pull the exact test scope for any past release, reproduce a past run, and they shortened their incident investigations by days. Uh, Even after this, fewer defects slipped through, and audit responses that used to take a week could take merely an afternoon.
Mm. And there is actually a nice analogy for this, the TÜV principle, TUV, right? It's an organization that does a technical inspection in Germany, like vehicle safety inspection. So the idea is when a new car model comes out, it doesn't override the inspection rules of the old model. The new model reuse many checks, modify some, and add new ones. But the old rulebook stays valid for the previous model. Software test case should work the same way. Every software version needs its own version test catalog. So for me, this makes it very tangible, this whole concept of versioning. Your old tests don't disappear. Your test case keep on growing like your application. Each execution just belongs to a given version. And it highlights an important point. It provides reuse for regression tests. So yeah, to put it simply, versioning means less rework, better traceability, reliable analytics, and the ability to answer any question about any past release with confidence.
That's right. So if you're listening now and you're thinking, this sounds great, but where do we start? We have a couple of tips that we've prepared for you based from our experience that might be able to help you take the first steps to adopt versioning in your projects. So my first tip from my experience would be to keep your test case versioning simple and consistent with your application releases. Define a naming and numbering convention. Here, semantic versioning works really well, and is probably the most logical convention to take, and make it part of your release choreography. So creating a version should be a defined step in your process, not an afterthought someone remembers at the last minute.
So tip 2, treat versions as a frozen state and never overwrite. If test case X was valid for version 1.0, it stays unchanged for that release. If you need to update it for 1.1, create a new version. Overwriting destroys history and makes past test result meaningless. And if your test cases is unchanged in 1.1, you can execute it there as part of regression testing.
And last tip, so tip 3, I would say to make traceability and auditability a goal from the start, even if you don't work in a regulated domain. Document who changed what and why, have approvals for major updates, and make sure that every test run references both the test case version and the application release that it was executed against. A test run without a version reference is not defensible. Every execution needs to clearly state what it was tested against. Otherwise, you can't explain why something has passed or failed at that point in time. And a practical workflow that ties all of that together would be create the version, link it to the release, adapt your test cases to the new release, run your test executions against that release, and keep the defects tied to the specific release. If you need to analyze versions later, the history is going to be right there waiting for you.
Yeah, and you don't need the perfect process on day one. Just start with a version per release and build from there.
Exactly. Okay, so that wraps up today's episode. If you'd like to see how versioning works in practice, we'd be more than happy to show you how we do versioning in our projects here at MGM. Actually, we've created our own tool, our own test management tool. It's called Q12TMT. It's also got versioning built into it, and it's designed around the workflow that we've been describing here today. We've included some links in the show notes below. So if you'd like to, you can book a demo directly with us and we can walk you through exactly how it works.
Yeah, or you can also follow the link to our versioning tutorial on YouTube for a quick overview. Feel free also to reach out to us on LinkedIn if you have any thoughts or story to share. We'd love to hear from you. Links to our profile will also be in the show notes.
Yes, feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. So thanks everybody for listening. And remember, keep your tests versioned and your releases auditable. So see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.